If you were online in the late 90s, you remember the sound, that sequence of beeps, screeches, and white noise as your computer dialed the internet. First came the dial tone, then rapid-fire beeps as your modem rang your provider. Finally, the handshake, electronic screaming that meant you were in. The whole thing took 30 seconds if you were lucky. But here was the catch. Your connection ran through the house phone line. Only one could use it at a time, and incoming calls got an engaged signal. This bred household warfare. I need the phone. Well, I'm doing homework, Mum, waiting to ring Nan. Ceefax was the internet before Britain had an internet. It launched in 1974, and for 38 years it was how millions of people checked football scores on a Saturday afternoon or found out if their train was cancelled. You switched on your telly, pressed a few numbers on your remote like 302 for football, and waited while blocky coloured text loaded onto the screen. Page 100 for news, page 443 for weather. It used spare lines in the analog TV signal that engineers accidentally stumbled across while developing subtitles for deaf viewers. Journalist Colin McIntyre became the first editor, writing every page himself at the start. By the 1980s, 22 million people used it weekly. When programs weren't broadcasting, the BBC showed rotating Ceefax pages with music playing over them. It switched off in 2012 when Britain went fully digital. Blue Peter started in 1958 and worked out its formula fast. Every week, presenters showed you how to turn household rubbish into something useful. Washing up bottles became pencil cases, yogurt pots became desk organizers, and toilet roll tubes could become anything if you had enough sticky back plastic, which is what they called sellotape because the BBC couldn't mention brand names. Here's one I made earlier, became part of the national vocabulary. Presenters needed that finished version to show what you were aiming for. The most famous make was probably the Advent crown from the early 60s, four-wire coat hangers bent into a circle and covered in tinsel and baubles. Then in 1993 came Tracy Island. Parents couldn't buy the official Thunderbirds toy that Christmas, so Blue Peter showed them how to build one from cardboard and paint. Chaos followed. For generations of British schoolchildren from the 1940s onward, a third of a pint of milk was part of the daily routine. The small glass bottles arrived at schools in metal crates, each one sealed with a silver foil cap. A child called the milk monitor handed them out at morning break, usually with a paper or plastic straw to pierce through the foil. The problem was storage. In summer, the crates sat in the playground or near radiators, and the milk went warm, sometimes developing a thin layer of cream on top that would curdle in the heat. In winter, it went the other way, and you'd find the milk partially frozen, with the cream pushing up through the foil like a small frozen mushroom. Some children loved it, others dreaded break time. In 1971, Margaret Thatcher stopped free milk for children over 7, earning the nickname Thatcher the Milk Snatcher, though by then plenty of pupils were quietly relieved. Your pencil case wasn't just storage, it was a status symbol on permanent display for everyone to judge. Top of the pecking order was the Helix ruler, specifically the shatterproof one, in translucent coloured plastic that you could bend nearly in half without it snapping. Below that came your gel pen collection, as many colours as possible, though the scented ones were where real playground currency was made. A strawberry-scented pink pen that barely wrote Trump 10 functional biros any day. Bendy pencils looked ace but made actually writing anything practically impossible. Novelty erasers came in every shape, going tiny hamburgers, cartoon characters, pieces of fruit. None of them could actually rub anything out. They just smeared grey streaks across your work. The ones that worked stayed at home in your collection. What came to school was for show, proof you had masses more back in your bedroom. BBC Schools programming started in 1957 when the corporation began broadcasting educational content during classroom hours. If you went to school in Britain between the 60s and 2000s, you watched Look and Read or Words and Pictures at some point. The ritual was the same. Someone wheeled an enormous television into your classroom. This thing built like a tank in wooden casing on a trolley with squeaky wheels. Before the program started, you watched a countdown clock with little dots disappearing one by one. The programs covered literacy, numeracy, French, science, whatever your teacher needed. Series like Watch for Infants or Scene for secondary pupils became embedded in the timetable, appearing at set times when normal lessons paused. By the 90s, most schools recorded them onto VHS, meaning you watched the same episode repeatedly. If you went to school in Britain during the 80s or 90s, you knew what it meant when the TV trolley appeared. This thing was built like a tank, about 4 feet tall with a massive CRT sitting on top. The TV came with wood effect doors and sometimes an anti-glare hood over the screen. These trolleys had thick metal frames with wheels that squeaked as they were pushed down the corridor. You'd hear that squeaking and know something decent was about to happen. No worksheets today. Instead, you'd be watching something educational like Words and Pictures or How We Used to Live, or if you were really lucky, an actual film. The teacher would wheel it to the front, plug in the power strip, and fiddle with those preset buttons until the picture came on. Playground crazes spread through British schools like wildfire before social media existed. One week, nobody knew what pogs were. The next, every kid was stacking cardboard discs and slamming them with metal slammers to win flipped ones. Someone turned up with a Tamagotchi or pack of Pokemon cards, and within days the playground was obsessed. Groups huddled at lunch trading duplicates or pressing buttons to feed digital pets before they died. Football stickers worked the same in the 80s and 90s. Over 90% of 9 to 11-year-old boys chanting got need while swapping panini stickers. The mark of a good craze was how quickly teachers banned it. Tamagotchis barely lasted a month before confiscation because the beeping disrupted lessons. Clackers got banned even faster after kids showed up with bruised fingers from swinging 2 plastic balls on string to bang them together. Kicking Pigeons was a bizarre novelty song that spread through British playgrounds in the late 1980s. The premise was deliberately absurd, singing cheerfully about kicking pigeons and scoring points for how far they flew. It emerged from comedy culture, but once it hit schools, it took on a life of its own. Kids would chant it in the playground, on the bus, anywhere, finding the sheer ridiculousness hilarious. The appeal was partly the taboo of singing about hurting animals, though everyone knew it was a joke. No one was actually kicking pigeons. It sits in a long tradition of playground humor that thrives on being silly, slightly naughty, and endlessly repeatable. From beans, beans, good for your heart to nursery rhymes sung with rude gestures, children have always loved songs adults find baffling or inappropriate. The shared comedy creates a world that belongs to them alone. Getting home from school meant one thing: get the telly on before you miss the start. CBBC ran from about 3:30 until 7 in the evening, and if you were late, you'd already lost 10 minutes of whatever was on. You'd dump your bag in the hall, kick your shoes off, maybe grab a drink if you were quick about it, then straight onto the sofa. The timing was tight because programs started promptly and there was no pausing or rewinding back then unless your parents had the video recorder set up. Most households had one TV, and if your mum or dad wanted the news at 6, you were out of luck. The whole routine revolved around those few hours between arriving home and tea time, and missing an episode meant waiting a week or asking someone at school what happened. If you've ever eaten Wotsits, you know what happens to your fingers. That bright orange cheese dust gets absolutely everywhere. It's not like normal food residue that brushes off. This stuff sticks. Your fingertips turn a shade of orange that looks almost radioactive, and it takes proper scrubbing to shift. The coating is slightly oily, which is why it clings to skin, clothes, school bags, whatever you touch. Quavers do the same thing, though maybe less aggressively. Skips leave residue too, but nothing matches Wotsits for coverage. Every British kid who had them in their lunchbox ended up with orange fingers by mid-morning. You'd see them in the playground, hands glowing like small traffic cones. It became part of the experience, the inevitable mark of a proper cheesy snack. Turkey Twizzlers were these spiraled strips of processed turkey meat that became the poster child for everything wrong with British school dinners in the 2000s. Picture a glistening grey coil covered in a bright orange coating, crunchy with salt and sugar, served alongside chips and beans. They only contained 34% actual turkey meat. The rest was turkey skin, pork fat, and over 40 ingredients including E-numbers and hydrogenated vegetable oil. Celebrity chef Jamie Oliver went after them in 2005 on his show Jamie's School Dinners, even blending up turkey scraps to demonstrate what went into them. The campaign worked. Twizzlers disappeared from school canteens nationwide. But here's the odd bit: a whole generation got nostalgic for them, remembering those beige lunches with affection. Bernard Matthews brought them back in 2020 with a healthier recipe, though they quietly disappeared again. The school disco was a legendary event in British childhood, typically held in the school hall with dodgy lighting and a DJ who was either someone's dad or from the local pub. The Macarena was absolutely mandatory. Everyone knew the routine, even if they couldn't do it properly. Saturday Night by Wigfield came next, followed by whatever Steps or S Club 7 song happened to be current. The dancing was terrible, with girls on one side and boys on the other, both basically jumping up and down unless it was a slow song which triggered panic. You'd gulp watered-down orange squash from plastic cups and stuff yourself with crisps and party rings. Teachers lurked around doing dad dancing, which was simultaneously mortifying and hilarious. The whole place stank of Lynx Africa and Impulse body spray applied with zero restraint. The Argos catalogue was massive, a hefty slab of laminated pages that turned up in British homes every year. From 1973 onwards, this was how you shopped before the internet existed. You'd sit on the living room floor for hours, flipping through everything from kettles to televisions to the toy section everyone actually cared about. Kids circled items with a pen or pencil, marking exactly what they wanted for Christmas or birthdays. You'd write the product code next to each one to make things easier. By the 1980s, 80% of British homes had one of these catalogues. It was nicknamed the Book of Dreams, and that fits really. People spent ages studying those glossy pages, planning purchases they might never make, imagining what their lives could look like with this particular gadget or that specific toy. Woolworths Pick'n'Mix was a Saturday ritual for British kids. You'd walk into your local Woolies and head straight for those long counters packed with white bowls of sweets. The hard part was deciding what to grab. You'd stand there weighing up your options, literally and figuratively, since everything was sold by weight: cola bottles or jelly snakes, fizzy ones or chocolate, flying saucers or foam bananas. Most kids had a system. Some went for maximum quantity, loading up on lighter foam sweets. Others wanted quality, splashing pocket money on heavier chocolate mice or strawberries. You'd fill your paper bag, trying to make every penny count, then hand it over to be weighed. Woolworths shut in 2009, taking Pick'n'Mix with it. That ritual of choosing your own sweets from those white bowls is just a memory now. Around 2004, British tabloids started reporting a new craze called happy slapping. The setup was straightforward. You'd approach a random person on the street, slap them across the face, while a mate filmed it on a mobile phone. The new camera phones made this dead easy. No planning needed, just record and share via Bluetooth. Videos spread through schools within hours, passed around like entertainment. By 2005, the media panic was in full swing. Newspapers blamed TV shows like Jackass for inspiring the behavior. Schools banned mobiles from classrooms. Parents worried their kids were either victims or attackers. Most incidents were just slaps or shoves, but a few turned fatal. Victims were kicked to death while teenagers filmed. Politicians demanded new laws, and the whole thing became shorthand for antisocial youth behavior, even though actual happy slapping was far rarer than headlines suggested. Snake on Nokia phones was everywhere between 1997 and 2007. If you had a Nokia, you had Snake. Over 400 million phones shipped with it pre-installed. You pulled your phone out during a bus ride, navigated to games, and there it was. Dark pixels forming a line on a greenish LCD screen. You steered with number keys, 8 dots, tried not to crash into your tail. Sessions lasted 2 or 3 minutes, perfect for killing time. The phones felt indestructible. Drop a 33 downstairs and it survived. That combination felt revolutionary. A fun game on a device you carried everywhere. These were not gaming devices. They were phones with entertainment built in, which somehow made it more exciting. For millions of people, Snake was their first video game, and they played it obsessively in waiting rooms, on buses, everywhere. Cereal box toys kicked off in 1909 when Kellogg's gave away a picture book with cornflakes purchases. The boom came after 1946 when plastic injection molding made cheap toy production possible. From the 50s through the 80s, sticking your hand into a cereal box for the prize was proper childhood currency. You'd get plastic dinosaurs that hatched from dissolving eggs, miniature license plates, or color-changing spoons from film tie-ins. The toys had to be small, cheap, and couldn't have loose parts kids could choke on. By the early 2000s, these prizes mostly vanished. Health marketing rules restricted promotions for sugary cereals, choking hazard lawsuits piled up, and concerns about disposable plastic made companies nervous. The magic of finding treasure in your breakfast ended, replaced by QR codes nobody cared about. At the start of every term, British schools would send you home with fresh exercise books and one instruction: cover them. This meant wrapping them in something protective, usually leftover wallpaper or brown paper from shopping bags. You'd lay the book face down on your paper, cut around it leaving a few inches of slack on all sides, fold the edges over, then secure everything with tape or glue. The goal was keeping the books from getting scruffy and torn over the months ahead. Some kids decorated their brown paper with felt-tip designs afterwards. Others used their mum's floral wallpaper or leftover wood chip stuff, which told you quite a bit about their household. Magazine pages showing pop stars or footballers were another option if you wanted something personal. It was a small ritual that made identical school-issue books feel like your own. Teachers would check to make sure you'd actually done it properly. Before organised youth leagues took over, most British kids learned football through improvised games in whatever space was going. You would use anything for goalposts, jumpers were the classic, but also wheelie bins, backpacks, coats, even someone's bicycle until they got fed up with it being walloped and rode off. Gardens worked if they were big enough, though you risked your dad going mental if the ball hit his greenhouse. Cul-de-sacs were ideal because passing cars naturally paused play. The local green or bit of waste ground often hosted massive 20-a-side matches that could run for hours, with kids joining or leaving and scores climbing into the 40s. There was no referee, just shouted disputes and rough agreements about boundaries. Keeping the ball was essential because if you passed it in a 20-a-side scramble, you might not see it again for 10 minutes.